A scream echoes down the surgical wing at 3 in the morning, thin and wet, the kind that cuts straight through anesthesia and sleep. I've learned that when a patient screams like that, it's rarely pain. Pain as rhythm. This was terror. Hospitals smell clean to civilians. To me, they smell like layers: bleach over antiseptic, antiseptic over iron, iron over something older that never quite leaves. Decay, maybe. Or memory. The lights hum overhead, fluorescent tubes flickering just enough to remind you they can fail. Machines breathe for people who can't. Monitors chirp in steady, indifferent patterns, measuring heartbeats like they're counting down to something. I've worked nights for over 20 years. ERs, ICUs, post-op floors, morgues in the basement where the air is always colder than it needs to be. I don't believe in ghosts. Or at least, I didn't. What I believe in is hypoxia, post-operative delirium, medication-induced hallucinations. Dilaudid can turn shadows into people. Morphine can give you conversations with the dead. Science explains most things if you're willing to look hard enough. But not everything. I first heard about the whispers from a chart note, buried between vitals and intake-output totals. Patient complained of multiple people talking in room despite being alone. No fever. No hypoxia. Heart rate mildly elevated, tachycardia, understandable after surgery. I chalked it up to anxiety and pain meds. Happens all the time. Then it happened again. Different patient. Same room. Room 9. 4 beds, post-surgical overflow. Curtains on tracks that squeal when you pull them back. That night, the room was half empty, 2 patients discharged earlier, the other beds stripped down to bare mattresses. One woman, mid-50s, status post-abdominal surgery, called me over with wide, glassy eyes. "Doctor," she whispered, "they won't stop talking." I checked her pupils. Equal, reactive. No cyanosis. Oxygen saturation fine. No signs of acute delirium. "Who's talking?" I asked. She swallowed. "The other people. They're whispering to each other. They keep saying my name." I pulled the curtains back myself. Empty beds. No staff. No visitors. Just a low mechanical sigh of 4 pumps and the cardiac monitor ticking out her sinus rhythm. I told her the truth I was allowed to tell. "You're alone. Your brain is still shaking off the anesthesia." I didn't tell her about the other note. We don't tell patients these stories. Fear raises blood pressure. Anxiety slows healing. Administrators hate that. Nurses talk, though. Always have. Especially on night shift, when the world outside forgets you exist. They warned me about a storage room down the hall, converted into a makeshift break space. No windows. One flickering light. A couch that smelled like old coffee and antiseptic wipes. They said they couldn't sleep in there anymore. Too many bad dreams. Too many times waking up feeling watched. I laughed. Fatigue breeds nonsense. I'd pulled 72-hour stretches as a resident. Sleep paralysis is textbook, REM intrusion, inability to move, a sensed presence. Classic. So I took my break in that room. I don't remember falling asleep. I remember waking up. My eyes were open. I was sure of that. The room was darker than it should have been, corners swallowed by shadow. I knew that someone else was there. Standing still. Watching. I tried to move. Nothing. Tried to speak. My jaw wouldn't obey. The light switch didn't work. The door wouldn't open. And the worst part, the part that still makes my pulse jump even now, was that instead of fighting, I felt myself fly back down. As if something had decided for me. The shape in the corner shifted. It didn't walk closer. It simply appeared nearer. Above me. A silhouette blocking what little light there was. For hours, real or imagined, it hovered, observing, while my heart raced and my body refused to respond. When I finally snapped out of it, I ended my break early. Cold sweat soaked through my scrubs. I never used that room again. I told myself it was stress. Then a nurse I trust, sharp, experienced, not prone to drama, told me what she saw in the staff lounge. She'd been asleep on the couch when a bright light woke her. Through the small glass window in the adjoining door, she saw a woman standing there. Not looking at her, just staring straight ahead. Old-fashioned hair, blue pinstripe scrubs, a nurse's cap, something I hadn't seen outside a museum display case. She thought it was a nurse at first. Yelled at her to turn the light off. No response. Later, she found out no one had been in that room. The door was locked, and an older staff member recognized the description immediately. A nurse who died decades ago, driving home after a night shift. Fell asleep at the wheel. I listened. I nodded. I didn't laugh. Because the night after that conversation, my patient in room 14 told me someone kept peeking into her room. Standing in the doorway. Watching. Old haircut. Old scrubs. I blamed Tylenol. Or rather, the lack of anything stronger. Post-op brains do strange things at 3 a.m. I decided to check on them myself. Halfway down the hall, I saw her. Blue pinstripes. Cap standing in the doorway, just like they'd said. When she turned and walked away, I followed. And then she vanished. Room 9 was the only place she could have gone. Inside, every patient was awake. Heart rates elevated. One woman asked for a blanket because it was freezing. Another flinched when I spoke, saying she hadn't seen me there. She was just here, the old woman said. The other nurse. Where did she go? I felt it then. A presence behind me. Cold. Brief. Gone like smoke. None of them slept after that. They said the beds felt full. Like someone was lying beside them. I haven't seen her since. And in a few minutes, I'm heading back in for another night shift. I walked into the hospital that night with a familiar sense of dread settling behind my sternum. The fluorescent lights flickered overhead as if reminding me that they, too, were fragile. Hallways that were usually antiseptic-smelling and dull now reeked faintly of something older, iron, bleach, and something else I couldn't name. Something waiting. Room 9 was first on my rounds. The air inside was colder than it should have been, the mechanical hum of monitors doing little to mask it. I checked vitals, adjusted drips, nothing unusual, at least on the sheets. But sheets don't measure presence. I felt it immediately. That weight in the corner of the room, a dark outline I couldn't quite see but could sense. Like the shadows themselves were holding still, watching. I kept my steps deliberate, my voice steady. Vitals look good, I murmured to myself, though my words barely reached the ears of anyone, or anything, around me. The patient by the window, an elderly woman recovering from hip surgery, flinched when I moved closer. "They're here again," she whispered, her voice trembling. "The other people." The whispers. "They won't leave me alone." I bent over her bed, pretending to check her line. "You're safe. No one else is in here," I assured her, knowing full well that what she, or I, was sensing wasn't bound by logic. And then I saw her. At the far end of the hall, just beyond the doorway. Blue pinstripe scrubs. Nurse's cap. Hair curled in that outdated 70s style. Her posture rigid, staring straight ahead, unblinking. She didn't react when I approached. She moved as if guided by some internal rhythm, a silent pulse I couldn't read. I followed, slow and cautious. Every step echoed too loudly. Each heartbeat was a drum in my chest. When I reached the junction where the hallway split, she had vanished. No trace. Not in the side rooms. Not in the shadows. Just gone. I told myself it was impossible. That hallucinations don't persist across multiple witnesses. That a patient seeing a ghost and a nurse seeing a ghost and then me seeing the same ghost were statistically absurd. Yet here she was. or had been. And the patient's fear had not been fabricated. Something had lingered in that room, in that hospital, beyond what any monitor or medicine could explain. Later, in the staff break room, the nurse who'd first told me about the woman in blue scrubs sat curled up on the couch, her eyes wide. "She comes in waves," she said quietly, more to herself than to me. "Sometimes you feel it at the door, sometimes in the storage rooms, always watching. Always waiting." I could feel the tension in the room, the chill that had nothing to do with the thermostat. Even the coffee machine seemed subdued, humming a low, uncertain note. I wanted to leave. Run to my office, lock the door, pretend none of this existed. But I couldn't. My oath, my experience, my curiosity, they all demanded I understand. I stayed silent, listening, watching. And as I did, I realized this wasn't just about the old nurse anymore. Room 9, the storage room, the staff lounge, they weren't isolated events. Something had attached itself to the hospital. To us. To the rhythm of night, the exhaustion, the fragility of the post-operative mind. By 4 a.m., the whispers began again. Not in the room, not in my ears, but beneath them, vibrating in the air. I could almost make out words. Faint. Disjointed. Repeated over decades. And in the distance, the faint echo of a scream, somewhere between a memory and the present, bouncing off walls that had seen too much. I've treated the living and the dying, dissected the rational from the irrational, but that night, I understood something I can't unsee. There are things in hospitals that don't belong to the world of charts, medications, or vitals. They exist between moments, between breaths, in the corners our eyes refuse to linger on. And sometimes, they follow you home. I didn't sleep after that shift. I sat in my apartment with the lights on, listening to the refrigerator hum like a distant ventilator, half expecting it to speak. Night shift rewires your brain, but this was different. This wasn't fatigue. This was intrusion. By the time I returned the following night, I'd done what doctors always do when they're afraid: we rationalize. I reviewed charts. I pulled old incident reports. I dug through archive staff records like a pathologist looking for a hidden malignancy. And buried deep, beneath outdated protocols and scanned handwritten notes, I found her. Registered nurse. Hired in the early 70s. Night shift regular. Excellent performance reviews. One incident report: fell asleep driving home after a double shift. Fatal collision. Time of death, 7:12 a.m. She never made it out of the hospital schedule. Just stopped clocking in. The hospital, as it turns out, never really let her go. That night, just before 2 a.m., we had a code Bluetooth floors down. Post-op patient. Sudden bradycardia, oxygen saturation tanking, lips already edging towards cyanosis by the time I arrived. Chest compressions echoed down the corridor, wet, mechanical thuds. Epinephrine. Airway secured. The usual choreography of controlled panic. As we worked, I noticed something wrong. The cardiac monitor lagged. Not malfunctioning, lagging. As if reality itself was buffering. The overhead lights dimmed, then steadied. And for a fraction of a second, I smelled something that didn't belong in a resuscitation bay. Old soap. Starch. Cold fabric. We got the pulse back. Weak, but present. As the team exhaled, I looked up and saw a reflection in the glass cabinet across the room. Standing behind us. Watching. Not helping. Just observing, like she was waiting for something we hadn't finished yet. When I turned, she was gone. Later, during rounds, room 9 called again. All 4 beds were occupied now. Every patient awake. Heart rates elevated. Blood pressure spiking despite adequate pain control. One man clutched my sleeve with surprising strength. "She's been leaning over me," he said. "I can feel her breath. Cold. Like she's checking if I'm dead yet." I checked his pupils. Dilated. But reactive. No hypoxia. No fever. No metabolic cause. Medicine had no answer prepared for this. Then the monitor flatlined in the bed by the door. As the alarm screamed, I felt it, that same pressure behind me. A presence so close I could almost feel fingers brushing my shoulder. The patient's skin went gray fast. Cyanosis blooming around the mouth like ink in water. "Start compressions," I ordered. And then something unthinkable happened. The monitor corrected itself without intervention. Sinus rhythm. Strong. Stable. The patient gasped, eyes flying open, sucking in air like he'd been underwater. No drugs administered. No shock delivered. I stood frozen, staring at the monitor, my pulse roaring in my ears. That wasn't medicine. That wasn't physiology. That was interference. As I stepped back, I saw her again, just for a moment, standing at the foot of the bed. Her gaze wasn't on the patient. It was on me. And for the first time, I understood the truth we never tell patients, never tell ourselves. Some people don't stay because they're lost. Some stay because they're still working. I stopped pretending after that night. You can lie to patients. You can lie to administration. You can even lie to yourself for a while. But when you've watched a cardiac monitor resurrect itself without compressions, without drugs, without reason, you either accept the impossible or you break. I chose to observe. I started tracking her appearances the only way I knew how, like a disease process. Time. Location. Patient condition. Room numbers. I noticed a pattern that made my stomach tighten every time I reviewed it. She never appeared around healthy patients. She lingered where vitals were unstable, where pain scores were high, where oxygen saturation dipped just enough to flirt with hypoxia. She hovered near beds where the body was undecided, still here, or already negotiating its exit. She wasn't random. She was triaging. At 2:47 a.m., a post-op bowel resection patient began desaturating. Mild tachypnea. Anxious. I stood at the foot of the bed adjusting oxygen flow when the temperature in the room dropped so suddenly the patient started shivering. Then the smell hit me again. Starch. Old soap. Cold air pulled straight from another decade. "She's here," the patient whispered, eyes locked on the doorway. "She's looking at me like I didn't finish my homework." I turned slowly. Blue pinstripes. Cap hands folded neatly in front of her. She didn't look menacing. She didn't look angry. She looked tired. Exhausted in a way only night shift workers understand. The kind of tired that sinks into your bones and never quite leaves, even after death. For the first time, she moved toward me. Every instinct screamed to step back, but I didn't. I'd pronounced more people dead than I could remember. Whatever she was, fear wouldn't help me understand it. She stopped inches away. No breath. No sound. Just cold, radiating, clinical, precise. And then something happened that finally cracked my rational mind. The patient's vitals stabilized. Respiration slowed. Heart rate normalized. Blood pressure settled into a perfect, textbook range. Better than it had been all night. She hadn't come to take him. She'd come to correct something. I realized then why room 9 felt so crowded. Why patients complained of people in empty beds. Why the night shift felt heavier there. Room 9 wasn't haunted. It was a waiting room. A place where the line between living and dying thinned enough for someone like her to still walk the floor. I don't know why she chose that room. Maybe that's where she used to work. Maybe that's where she died on her last shift. Hospitals imprint on people. Especially the ones who never clock out. Just before dawn, as the unit quieted and the monitors returned to their monotonous rhythm, I saw her one last time. At the end of the hall. She turned her head, not toward a patient, not toward a room, but toward the exit. Toward the parking garage. Toward the road she never finished driving. For the first time, she walked away. I haven't seen her since. But every night shift, when a monitor hesitates, when a patient improves without explanation, when the air turns cold for no clinical reason, I listen. Because one day, she may come back. And I don't know if next time, she'll be there for them. Or for me. You think hospitals are just places of healing, but sometimes, the past never leaves. If you want me to share more stories like this, tales that blur the line between life and death, subscribe and hit the notification bell. Comment below if you've ever felt something in the hospital that didn't make sense. I'll read the scariest ones on the next episode.